Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Privacy Rules Mid-Member podcast. Today, I'm joined by our colleague from Russia, that is Sergey Medvedev from the firm Gorodissky and Partners, and I'm pleased to introduce him to you all. Hello, Sergey.
Hello, everyone. It's nice for me to be here with you. Hello, Alessandro.
It's our pleasure, Sergey. The time is really short during our podcast, so I would like to start immediately discussing about what's happening in Russia. We know that there is a law amendment currently on your Code of Administrative Offences. That is something that is somehow related also to data privacy and the use of data. So I would like to ask you a bit what's happening there and what's the amendment that is ongoing in Russia.
Yes, this is the federal law amending the Code of Administrative Offences, as you mentioned, related to the Russian Federation, of course. And the localization requirement is one of the main obligations of the data operators. Basically, it's the same as the data controller. In certain senses, they are different, but still it's one of the principal obligations to store the data related to Russian citizens in the territory of the Russian Federation if you collect such data online, for example, on the internet. So before, there was no fine for such for a breach of such obligation. There were some minimum fines related to general data processing requirements. Minimum in practice was about 3,000 rubles, which is about $50, which is something very small. And also there were some fines related to non-submission of certain data to Roskomnadzor, the Russian IT regulator, which may lead to disqualification of the director. So there were some other reputational risks, but in general, there were no specific fines for that. And right now, they want to implement a specific fine for such a breach, which would be equivalent to what they have in Europe, for example. In Europe, we know that, for example, in UK, the non-submission of certain information to the regulator may lead to a fine of £50,000. In France, it can be 30,000 plus sentence. So these are critical fines, important to know for all data operators, and we are following the world trend in harmonizing the liability for the breach of data processing requirements, especially from the localization standpoint.
I understand. So, if I understood well, Sergey, basically Russia is substantially increasing the fines, the possible fines for data breaches and violation.
Yes, you understood absolutely correctly. Right now, the fine for the first offense for legal entities, for companies, is about 6 million rubles, which is around 95,000 US dollars. And if such offense is repeated within a year, once again, then the repeated offense may be sanctioned within 18 million rubles, which is about 300,000 US dollars. So the fines are harsh and high because there are not only data breach liability sanctions, but others related to a public order, related to IP infringement, related to cars, traffic, etc. So if we take all these fines, the fines for data localization breach requirement will be the highest if, again, the law will pass all readings and will be signed into law by the president.
And may you let us know which are the fines for breaching the localization requirements?
Right now, as I mentioned, no specific fines are provided. The general fines for non-submission of certain pieces of information are minimum fined by 3,000 rubles, which is about $50. then there is a fine like disqualification of the director. That's why the companies usually care. And even more important for online businesses and the companies that are doing e-commerce, the blockage of the website. And this is confirmed by the not recent but well-known the case, LinkedIn case, which was blocked in Russia, as you know, for violation of the data breach requirements.
Okay, and then may I ask you if at what stage is the revision of the bill actually?
Yes, so it was submitted in June, and then it passed the first reading in the Duma. That's the first chamber of the Russian parliament, and they decided to implement some changes to the bill because it wasn't so proper. So the changes will come into play in another couple of months, and then the second reading will take place. So we hope the second reading will be before the end of this year. If everything goes smoothly, the law can be approved by the first chamber of the Russian parliament already by this year, and then it has to be approved by the second chamber, which is the council, basically. And when it is approved, it will be sent to the president for signature. If the president signs, or when the president signs, the law will be published in the Russian media and, of course, in all available legal sources, which we hope it will take place next year.
Excellent, Sergey. Thank you. And I think another very interesting point is the one related to the action that can be taken by the supervisory authority. And it results to me that actually the Russian Data Protection Authority has strengthened the state supervision over the data controllers. Is that true? Is that there something going on also under this point of view?
Yes, the Russian regulator, IT regulator, or Roskomnadzor, we call them, they do usual checks, and such checks or surveillance or supervision, it can lead to initiation of cases, and they can do protocols and send the cases to courts. Before, it was done only by the Russian prosecutor's office. Right now, they have the competence to do it on their own. And in February this year, also, the new rules for such checks were implemented. And basically, the rationale behind these new rules is the competence for them of systematic surveillance of the data operators. So they can do it either online if they see that something posted online is in breach with data regulations, or they can use third-party claims, for example, claims of the data subjects, physical persons, that they dislike the manner in which data operator process their data. So this systematic surveillance can be done once per 3 years, or sometimes this can be cut down to once per 2 years in certain cases when, for example, a Russian company organizes the data processing activities under the authorization of the foreign data controller. In other words, it's a Russian data processor working under the agreement with the data controller. So in this case, it can be, the surveillance can be done a couple times per 4 years. So this is why it is very important to keep everything updated, verified, and in accordance with the national legal provisions. Such legal check, of course, can be a random check. In other words, they won't send you anything, and it can be randomly taken. And because these rules were implemented in 2019, this rule will apply starting from this year and starting from now on. And that's why the data controllers must be very careful. I mentioned the LinkedIn case, but this is not the only important landmark case. As you probably know, Facebook and Twitter, they faced similar problems in terms of data privacy. The local district court, the Court of General Jurisdiction, they find them and basically found data privacy infringement. And Roskomnadzor understands how Twitter and Facebook are important for Russian citizens. They don't want to block everyone in the world there, and they gave them, according to news, 9 months to put everything in order, so that they can quickly localize the servers, the data centers, and check everything in terms of Russian data in order to avoid the breach. So that means that Russian regulator is very aggressive against companies, even worldwide companies, not only Russian companies. And we should keep an eye on it and always follow the news, the actions of Roskomnadzor. That's what we do here.
It's interesting that the Roskomnadzor has pretty strong and interesting power, I would say, and also in relation to control the companies. So I think my next question on that is, what should company do to ensure and demonstrate their compliance, not only in relation to, for example, the localization requirement, but also to other requirements?
Yeah, that's a good practical question. And of course, the first thing they need to care about is the data minimization. So, for example, in many jurisdictions, simple name, and in Russia also, will never be treated as personal data because it cannot directly or indirectly identify a person. We can have several names, or there can be several names attached to different people. So why you and not me, or vice versa? So data minimization, when you collect everything online, maybe is a good first recommendation. If you decide to collect everything because you are an online seller or an online shop or an auction where you need to deliver your goods to the address, to deliver you need to know the mobile phone or the phone of the person. You need to know credit card details because otherwise you won't authorize the payment, etc. Then, of course, this information must be collected properly and under consent of the respective people. So recommendation number 2 is to prepare all required internet-related documents, including terms of services, privacy notices, cookie policies, because cookies is another hot issue for Russia as well as in Europe, and other documents required to comply with data privacy law. And of course, if you do a business in Russia, the Russian language will be a green light for Roskomnadzor to proceed with a check. So again, if you do your business aimed at the Russian market, everything has to be performed in accordance with the Russian law and not in accordance with the GDPR. Because many would think that GDPR is everything, we comply with GDPR, we cover all the world. This is not exactly so. During our advices or during our seminars, we always say that GDPR is GDPR, and Russian federal law on data privacy and personal protection is different, and they both have to be compliant. So for the website directed in Russian market, several documents or only one set of documents properly prepared under Russian law must be prepared. The notification to Roskomnadzor, not only in Russia, in many jurisdictions, registration, or in other words, notification is important. So how you prepare it, how timely and properly you will update it, will affect your further actions and your further business. Because if Roskomnadzor finds that, for example, your notification is not so updated, they may ask to clarify or to remove certain data or to update it in accordance with your current state of business to be updated. And of course, if you do business with foreign companies, then your agreements, including international data transfer agreements, your data processing agreements, must correspond and comply not only with a foreign law, if they're, for example, prepared in accordance with a foreign law, but also in accordance with the Russian requirements and Russian personal data law, because a Russian element is involved. There are some other recommendations. Because of time, I can't give it all to you, but of course we would be happy to see your further questions, or if members or clients can have further questions, we can always reply via email.
Yes, thank you very much, Sergey, for your overview. And as you mentioned, the time it's so short during the podcast, so we don't have time to touch everything, of course. But I think we gave a really nice and interesting overview of what's happening there, and some tips on what is better to do. And of course, I invite all our listeners to contact you or contact us for connect you with you. For any kind of issues related to Russia and the use of data and privacy, of course. So I would like to thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you, and I would like to thank also our listeners for joining us today, and I invite them to follow us on our social media and on our website and privacyrules.com, and also to follow Gorodissky, of course, that works a lot, not just in privacy, but in many others related sectors. So for sure, keep an eye to them, in particular if you have to do something with Roskomnadzor, at least. Thank you again.
Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you to all participants. Thank you to Privacy Rules. You guys are the best.